So I called a business broker and was like, hey, I've heard that you can sell based off revenue. So if I'm doing $500,000 a year in revenue, that means I can sell for 1/3 of that, right? And he's okay. Let's talk about that. He very nicely walked me through what a buyer's looking for. He goes, Joe, if you could go out there and spend, let's call it $200,000 on a business, would you spend $200,000 on a business that required you to work 80 hours a week, only paid $50,000 a year, and had all the financial risk of losing that investment? When you can go get hired as a general manager, have less headache, zero financial risk. And the opportunity is you might even get a hiring bonus to join. So you're getting paid to join sometimes. So would you go do that? And I was like, no. He goes, nobody else will either.
Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Accelerator Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Scott, multi-unit owner for almost 20 years. And now with Ownership, we help restaurant owners increase their profits, increase their sales, and help them have more freedom with their time. So we've got Joseph here with us today. And Joseph has been a client of ours for, I don't know, about how long now?
Since November of 25, so 7 months. Don't do public class, right?
So he's been a client for a little while now. And another cool thing about him is you are also a business broker. And so you also have a business that helps people buy and sell businesses. So we're going to talk a little bit more about both what we've helped to do with your business, your restaurant, and then also get into the stuff you need to know about selling your restaurant and all of the ins and outs of all that kind of stuff, or purchasing, or whatever the case is. We're going to dive into it. So that's what we're going to cover today, man. So glad to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here. We'll talk for way too long, so I'll let you lead it. Where would you like to start?
Yeah, well, first let's start off with kind of where you were before you met us. Like what drove you to meet us in the first place? Like what was going on in the business? Just give us that whole little origin story. I know you told me the other day, but yeah, just for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah. So my wife and I quit our job. So we lived in the Minneapolis Metro, which is, we're in Minnesota. We lived in the Minneapolis Metro. We both had, just typical jobs. And we found a restaurant for sale, and it was a struggling restaurant. And so we both quit our jobs, moved about an hour away from the Metro, and just went to town. I mean, the sales were like $10,000 a month when we bought it. And we got it up to about 1.2 million in sales over the course of 5 years.
Yep.
So a ton of work, but we learned firsthand what it was like to be an owner operator. And what eventually drove us to Ownership was that we were either having to be in the business every day in order to make money. And I didn't want to have to be there nights and weekends. Frankly, I wanted to spend time with my family. And so we were looking and trying to figure out what to do. We hired a GM, but by the time we got the GM in place, we were basically break even, or maybe a couple of percentage in profit. Yeah. And I just didn't know what to do. And then Ownership started popping up in my feed, and I was like, okay, I got to give this Andrew guy a shot. So I connected with you guys, and I was like, all right, they know what they're doing. They've got proofs in the pudding. So let's jump in. Coaches help you skip levels. And a little side story here. We were at the point where we're going, we've got this chunk of money, and we need to figure out what to do to fix this problem. And my wife is very risk averse, and she's like, Joe, I don't know if it just feels like too big of a risk. And I said, tell you what, I've got this little pile of savings in cryptocurrency. If this doesn't work, if Andrew doesn't perform, I'll sacrifice that and replace the money. And she's like, deal. So it wasn't even a conversation. Within 2 months, our net profit had switched from, a couple of percent to about 10%, without having to be there. So I didn't have to get into the business anymore. It was just our prime costs were at mid 70s. And through working with Dylan and just really dialing in the food costs, really dialing in any pricing changes, really dialing in like, hey, are you ordering too much and throwing stuff away? And scheduling, all of that stuff, just really fine tooth comb going through everything. And we're sitting about basically at about 60% before our royalty for price. Okay. So it's been awesome. I mean, it's about a 15% swing.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, any time you could look at a 15% swing. So realistically, when you look at a 15% swing, like people don't understand it, but like, because when you add, say, 10 grand to the top line, then you take out your food costs, you take out your labor, you take out, all the other stuff that happens when you add those sales. But if you save that on your expenses, like 15% savings on your prime cost becomes 15% added to your bottom line. And that's not just, I mean, and sure, it's like, oh yeah, 15%. But when you actually look at the bottom line, that actually probably 10x your bottom line profit. You know what I mean? So
It was beautiful.
It's yeah, it's just interesting to see that. And people are saying, oh, like, 10%, whatever. That's not anything crazy. But for you not to be in the business, to still have money coming in, a business that runs for itself, like that's just to make 10% for doing nothing other than owning it. That is actually the dream for an owner. That's what should happen. It's like if you own shares of Coca-Cola, you're not in there bottling the product, but you're getting the dividends, you're getting the benefits of being an owner. And so that's where so many people get it misconstrued, because they're like, oh, well, you got to be in the business. And then they take, because they don't pay themselves, it looks like they're making money, but they're just not paying themselves. So really they're just free labor. And anyway, it's just a lot of people get that confused. But what you're talking about is making changes and actually driving your net profit up significantly and just being in a whole different place without having to do the work yourself, which is awesome. So now you've got time for the family. You can do the things you want. You have a whole other business that you're working with. But one thing I wanted to dive into here, because this is a very big misconception, and I wish I could like take everyone and just repeat this with a loudspeaker again and again, is that people come to us and they're looking for like a magic bullet. Like I'm sure as soon as you said, oh, we brought down our prime costs, we looked at our inventory and our ordering. And so I have no doubt there's probably thousands of people that as soon as you said that just went, well, I do inventory and ordering. Oh, I already do that. I already do that stuff. So like, well, what's the difference? I already do it. Well, what did they do differently? Like, 'cause I already do that. It's the same way as saying like, I cook a steak. Meanwhile, you're cooking like this Wagyu steak that is perfect sear. It's cooked perfectly compared to a steak that is bought at the grocery store, 30% marked down because it's expiring today and it looks kind of iffy. Like, it's almost, you got to cook it and then you just like totally burn it. It's like you're both cooking steak, but one's vastly different. So here's what I want to talk about is like the fine tooth comb piece that you mentioned. The piece of it is just like you were doing all the stuff anyway. Like you had pricing on your menu. Like you had priced your menu at some point in some way, but was it done to the level at which it needed to be? Do you know what I mean? You see that difference I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. And that was what, it was really, and again, it's so, I could dive into each specific area, but what I like to relate it to is there's a reason an Olympian has a coach, right? You might be a good athlete and you might be doing the things, but you need somebody in your corner to go, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. This is tweak this, tweak that. And that's how that, you can win, right, in the Olympics is by having somebody doing that. It's the same way with coaching. Like I might know, hey, my food cost needs to be X on these items, but actually having somebody who goes, hey, have you thought about doing Y and Z? And they go, oh, okay, I'm not comfortable with that. Like I wouldn't have done that by myself, but the coach is telling me to do this. It's uncomfortable, but I'm going to trust what they say. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, we go back to the drawing board and maybe we try A and B next time.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I love to say, because sometimes it's not even like, it's not like we come in, we're like, yeah, you need to double your prices and scare away all your customers. That's the instant thing that people think. We're like, no, we just have to take what you're already doing and we actually just have to reallocate it. We have to, maybe we have to move some items around on the menu. Maybe we have to adjust certain small pieces of pricing. Maybe we have to add upsells at a different places. Like there could be a million different ways to do it. But at the end of the day, all of those things put together, it's, there's like most businesses die from like a death by 1,000 cuts. You've heard that saying before. Oh yeah. There's no magic bullet. There's just like 1,000 golden BBs. That's like, that's the way that we like to think about it, because it's not one thing. It's just doing everything 1% better creates such a drastic difference at the end of the day. And so if you're sitting there thinking, hey, like, well, I already do scheduling. Like, sure, you do it, but are you doing it well enough? Is it getting the goals that you have? Like I actually had a client we were talking to the other day, and they were saying, yeah, like our labor targets right now, like we always hit them in the summer and like we never meet them in the winter. So like it probably evens out. And so then we were like, does it? Does it actually even out? Like, let's do the math on that and figure that out. And also, what good is a target if you can really easily hit it in the summer and then you don't hit it in the wintertime? Like, maybe you should have a different target based on your volume. Like, that's how businesses actually run, because we want to, in the summertime, like labor should never be easy to hit, right? If it's easy to hit, it means your target's wrong. And then if you can never hit it, that also means your target's wrong. So It's just those types of things that just, getting owners to think through that and say, oh, okay, maybe I actually have to do it. Because in summertime, here's the other big thing too, because it's summertime right now as we're filming this. So in summertime, everyone has more sales. So they care a little bit less about overages in their food and the labor, right? They're like, oh, it's only a couple percent over, whatever. They don't really care as much. They don't watch it as much. They don't schedule with as much intention as they do in like the really slow times where every dollar matters. But what people don't get is that in the summertime, when say you're doing 30 to 50% more volume than you do in your slow time, this is now the period that you need to make as much money as you can because it's so much easier. It's like there's a saying that Alex Hormozy says, which is when it gets easy, that's when you go hard. And so like when sales are coming easy, that's when you go hard on making sure you keep as much of it as you can. You can't forget about the upsells and the cross sells, and you can't forget about all the stuff that you need to do to make sure your business is as profitable as possible, because there's like twice the amount of customers coming through. So an extra $1 on each one of those checks is going to mean twice as much as it does in the winter, just for easy math. So like I ask people, when is it more important to upsell? And they're like, oh, in the wintertime when you really need it. I'm like, no, it's in the summertime. So you got twice as many people. So it's going to be double the impact on your yearly P&L if you focus on it at the right time, right?
Yep.
You just feel it more in the winter because you're scared and you're in lack of mode or scarcity mode. So anyway, so I get on little tangents about that stuff because it just frustrates me so much. Is that like right now is the time to put the money in the bank, and this is when most people are like, everything's going pretty good, there's money in the bank account, I'm gonna let it ride, I'm not gonna focus as much on it, I'm gonna take more vacations, which is cool, take a vacation, but also like your business still needs to, like, this is go time. This is the money that keeps you through your slow season. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, because what winter's like in Minnesota. It's you got to prepare for it, right?
Well, and we're kind of lucky in that we're takeout and delivery for pizza. So we're a pizzeria, and so our sales
probably go up then.
Yeah, so we just get more deliveries in the winter, which makes it a little hard on the drivers. But once they get used to it, then they know what to wear. Some of them have way more fun delivering in the winter because people are so appreciative that they got through the bad weather to get to them, and so they can get better tips too. So it works out.
Nice. Okay, awesome. Well, man, I think that's great. Like you've come such a long way, and what I've heard from the coaching team is that you've always implemented things, and that's the biggest thing, right? Like you can take a concept and then you actually put the action into place, and that's one of the big things that our best clients. That's what they do. They take the instruction. They go, I know this is uncomfortable. I know this is different. I'm a little scared, but they do it anyway. And that's where the results come from. Because you keep doing the same things over and over again, you're going to get the same results. And that's why you were here, to do something different.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So, all right, let's dive into this a little bit. So telling people about selling a restaurant, like, I guess, well, first let's back up. Like, how did you even get into the whole business broker thing anyway?
Yeah, I heard about business brokering because I was about 2 years in. I was working 80 hours a week. My wife and I were both working 60, 80 hours a week, trying to figure out why we're working so hard. Like, why would you spend 60 to 80 hours a week to not make a lot of money? And so I called a business broker and was like, hey, I've heard that you can sell based off revenue. So if I'm doing $500,000 a year in revenue, that means I can sell, for 1/3 of that, right? And he's like, okay, let's talk about that. So he was really nice, kind of just talked me through it. Yeah. So he very nicely walked me through what a buyer's looking for. And he goes, and he just kind of relayed it back to me. He goes, Joe, if you could go out there and spend, let's call it $200,000 on a business, would you spend $200,000 on a business that required you to work 80 hours a week, only paid $50,000 a year, and had all the financial risk of losing that investment, when you can go get hired as a general manager, have less headache, zero financial risk, and the opportunity is you might even get a hiring bonus to join. So you're getting paid to join sometimes. So would you go do that? And I was like, no. He goes, nobody else will either. I was like, darn it. You know, and so I was like, okay, well, let's back up. What makes a business valuable? So he walked me through kind of some of the things that I want to talk about here and what really a buyer in a bank is looking for.
And well, let's get into that in a minute. What I want to cover first is just, I want to start off with, like, what are some of the biggest myths that people have around selling a business, or, like, you know, why do so many owners get surprised when they go to try and sell? Like, let's talk through that a little bit.
Yeah. So I would say the three biggest myths is, I'll just sell it when I'm ready, which sounds great. You think of it like the housing market. Hey, I put my house up, it's going to sell. Yeah. And if you start, you know, if your business isn't in great shape, isn't in a great location, and you want a price that's too much, you might sit on the market for years. We just helped sell a restaurant owner's business, round numbers. They were making about $170,000 a year as an owner operator, working 30, 40 hours a week. And they were part of a franchise, really established operations. And they had a really hard time selling for a 2x multiple. And it was in the metro area. And they were on the market for 2 years. So you're just putting it on the market doesn't mean somebody's out there is going to buy it. And if you say, hey, I'm going to sell it when I'm ready, do you start looking for a gas station when your gas light comes on? Or you probably waited too long. And so, you know, even with the full tank of gas, know where your next gas station is. Otherwise, you're going to be in a little bit of a panic, and you might sell it for a price you're not happy with, or might sit for a really long time.
Well, I mean, just comparing it to the housing market too, like, in some cases, sometimes you need to do some renovations on your house. You might need to fix up a few things to get it ready for sale. You know, like my grandfather has been doing some renovations at his house that probably needed to get done because he's anticipating, you know, selling and moving into probably a retirement home at some point. So it's like, those are the things you don't think about. Yeah, I would agree. A lot of people are like, oh, well, you know, whenever I just get tired of this, I'll just sell it. And as if it's just an easy thing that happens really quickly. But, like, I guess in your experience, like, how long on average does it take to sell a business? I mean, there's going to be a range on that, but, like, what have you seen?
What we tell any of our clients, anybody who's looking at it, is we say 6 to 9 months is the average, right? There's ones that sell really fast. Like, I had one sell within a couple of months in the same franchise chain that we sold. It was a couple of months before it sold. The other one sat for 2 years. So there is a wide range, and it comes down to expectations. It comes down to pricing. It comes down to finding the right buyer, honestly. Like, the right buyer showed up for that other location. It was priced properly and everything. So the smaller you make your buyer pool, the longer and the more chance you run of being on the market for a long time.
Yeah. So, and I think pricing probably has a lot to do with that too, because if you think you're going to get a nice chunk of change for your restaurant, meanwhile, the reason you're wanting to sell is because you're frustrated, you're barely making money, and you're there all the time, it's going to be harder to sell that kind of a restaurant at a price that you'll want. You know, like, sometimes, sure, you might just be able to get out of it and cover your loans or whatever you might have on it. Or, you know, like, sometimes, like, it would be looked at that way, like an asset sale almost, right? Like, and here's the other thing too. I've heard people like, oh, just sell the equipment. You know, like, I put $100,000 of equipment in this place, but, you know, used equipment is worth like 10 cents on the dollar, like maybe 20 cents.
And not only that, it depends if you're in a lease and your lease is $5,000-$10,000 a month. Buying said equipment, you're also signing up for that lease if the equipment's going to be in the same area, in the same place, right? So if you're trying to sell your business just for asset value, there's also the other side of that, which is there's a reoccurring lease payment just to be in that spot. So someone has to get the equipment, get the sales up to a certain point. So it's just as much of a risk as honestly going out and buying brand new equipment. So you know what I mean? Like it's tough.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different things there. All right, so what are some other myths that people believe when they go to sell their restaurant?
So a big one that I've seen is I can sell my business myself, or I can find my local residential realtor can help me sell my business. And I've seen it happen. I'm not saying it can't happen, but if you want to sell your business smoothly, and a good broker is going to educate you on the whole process. They're also going to educate buyers on the whole process. They manage expectations. They do marketing. They do buyer screening, negotiations, due diligence, financing, attorneys, CPAs, all the way to closing, right? There's just so many pieces of the pie to help you understand where to go. And I often joke that business brokers at times can be more of a therapist than anything, which sounds kind of funny. But when you're taking somebody's life's work and you're handling that, and it's going to become someone else's life's work, right? It gets emotional very quickly. I would say that's the next biggest one is I can sell it myself, or I can save the money. It's like, very rarely do I see that happen.
Yeah, or at least selling it for the price that you want, And realtors typically they're not always trained necessarily on that. They don't have that experience on how to even value or price a business like that, right?
Exactly. So, and it's keeping it confidential as well, right? So we do a confidential listing. So you're going to be, your competitors aren't going to know that you're for sale. So we do it in a way that keeps that from happening. And most residential realtors don't have the infrastructure, the systems, or the processes to allow that confidential listing to take place.
Yeah, fair enough. I think another one of the big myths, was kind of ties into my next question, is like, what actually makes a restaurant valuable? Because a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to, like you first did when you said like, oh, I'll be able to sell for like, half of my revenue, right? So if I do $1 million, I'm going to walk away with $500,000 clean on this deal. And that's what people think. That's why selling becomes a very attractive thing, because they don't really understand what makes a business valuable. So let's walk through that. So how do you value businesses, or if we're looking at our own business, how should we begin to understand what a buyer would start to value?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of different questions in there. So hopefully I'll answer. So how we do evaluation is we look at your last 3 years tax returns. Yep. We find the seller's discretionary earnings. So that starts with your net profit, right? So owner's compensation, one owner's compensation. So if it's you and a partner, if it's you and your wife, if it's somebody else, you can only add back one. So net income, owner's compensation, non-cash expenses. And then there's 2 additional areas that will get lumped in, and buyers and banks fight over these 2, as sometimes they're allowable, sometimes they're not. It's going to be the discretionary personal expenses, as well as non-reoccurring expenses, right? So you spent $10,000 updating your website and doing this and that. It's a one-time expense.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll do that. Sometimes they won't. It tends to start to be a big negotiation point. So really the best way to do this is to not only work with a broker, but also to understand what the SBA can lend on your business. Mm-hmm. So the SBA looks at and has certain filters. And just because the SBA won't lend on a certain business to a certain point, let's say you've priced at 500, they'll only lend to 400, doesn't mean you can't sell for 500, but it's a really good benchmark to know whether you're in the ballpark or not. So that's going to be that. And then we also look for comps. So we look at other similarly sized business and then use that multiple for what they sold for, and then get us a general ballpark. We look at key man risk. So are you the main guy? If everything depends on you, you're now looking for a cook, you're now looking for a marketer, you're now looking for all the roles that you fill. So if you've got a great management team, that multiple starts to go up, because the less risk, the higher the multiple. The more risk, the less the multiple. And as well as the quality of your equipment also does start to take in effect, right? If all your equipment is 10 to 20 years old, then you look at it and you're like, that could break at any second. A buyer's going to come in and they're going to look at that and go, I'm going to have some capital expenditures in the near future, so I'm going to start wanting to bring the price down.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of recap that, so if everyone can understand, we really kind of look at your net income. So again, if you don't have profit and loss statements, you're going to have to get those before you even try and do this. And you're going to need to back those up with your tax returns. So if you haven't filed your taxes, you got to do that too, by the way. But we're taking the net income and then adding back things like whatever you paid yourself. And guess what? If you haven't really paid yourself much, it doesn't really help you all that much here, and then you start to add back some things such as, like you said, whether they be capital expenditures or one-time expenses, like, say if you bought a big piece of equipment or something like those things that are non-recurring, and any personal expenses. So if you write off your car through your business, you can say, okay, well, that's what that was. And you can add back some of those things to help a little bit.
It depends. If you're taking catering orders with your vehicle, it's been really hard to convince a bank that it's worth adding back. Yeah. And as well, non-cash expenses are like amortization, depreciation, interest. Yeah. Those things are, again, without getting too technical, there's, if you bought a big piece of equipment and you write it off on depreciation, you're getting that depreciation. So you're going to get that add back. Sometimes that piece of equipment, right, kind of shows up in a different place.
Yeah, for sure. So then we take that and then we get to the multiple. And so what would you say are some of the common multiples? Let's just say for round math, the end number is, let's say, 50 grand in net profit for the year on average over the last 3 years. And let's say there's 50 grand in things that get added back. So 100 grand, just round numbers, using that just for an example. So what kind of multiples are common for restaurants based on different scenarios?
Hey, it's Andrew here. Just taking a quick 20-second break to share something important. Did you know that you can master your restaurant's numbers in just 5 minutes per week? I created a free, no-fluff 7-minute training where I show you exactly what numbers you must track, where you're bleeding money, and I give you the exact tool we use with our clients to do it. Grab your free copy by clicking the link in the description below.
So I'll give two answers, right? If you're in the business every day and you're key man risk and you're making 100 grand, so that officer's compensation and the profit, you're anywhere between a 1 and 2 multiple, typically.
So let's
not
break
great.
that down. Yeah. Even if you're doing $1 million in sales, but your total between your pay and the profit of the business and the add backs comes out to like 100 grand, you're saying that you might be able to sell that business for 100 grand to 200,000. That's pretty nice.
Again, there's always exceptions to the rule. I'm more than happy to be wrong, right? At any point in time. There's businesses I've listed that I looked at the owner and was like, hey, just a heads up, I think we're bananas over here. But if that's what you want, like let's see if we can make it happen. And again, these weren't restaurants, so I'm kind of using but they sold for a number that I thought was bananas. So I always approach this as I'm willing to be wrong and that there's an exception out there. Yep. But I don't want you to be under the understanding this is a slam dunk.
You're going to get a 5 times multiple. You're just because I've got $1 million in sales and we make 50 grand a year, I'm going to be able to get $500,000 out of this thing. So that's really interesting, because I remember when I started looking at valuations, I was surprised, because like literally it's about how much you keep at the end of the day. Your revenue doesn't matter. Now, there are some exceptions, of course, which is if you get a buyer that doesn't know anything and you can pull the wool over their eyes and they make a big mistake in buying it. I say that because I did that. I did that as in I was the buyer that was stupid. That was my first business. I way overpaid for this business, which I had no business paying for. You told me how much you bought your first business for, and I'm like, damn, I wish I had paid that for mine, because like I paid 150 grand for my first business, and it was probably worth like maybe 50, maybe. And I also didn't look at income statements and tax returns. He just wrote up on an Excel sheet what a fake budget. And I'm like,
we got a napkin. We got a napkin with the list of expenses. He had 4 restaurants all into one bank account. So for him to separate out what he was actually making, he was just like, well, my utilities are this is this, and the equipment's worth about this. So if you buy it for X, I'll let it happen. And we were like, well, okay.
But I mean, for you though, it's like, at least the number was low. For me, 150 grand was a significant expenditure for a business that I swear that I might have paid like 50% of revenue. Like, so I was.
Oh, wow. You don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And looking back, I had no idea how to price the business. The guy was just willing to let it go for like basically the price of the equipment. And I said, cool. Like, like, so if he would have told me it was 50 grand, I probably would have said, cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not like, I just, he set the bar himself. And if he'd have said it higher, I might've gone with it. I'm not saying I was, I had no idea.
Yeah, when we were having that conversation, I was like, man, I wish that was me. But okay, so that's kind of the multiple for business when you're an owner operator. You're in there every day because people are basically then buying a job. So how much is that job really worth? Is what you're valuing, right? Okay, so now let's take the other example where it's a business runs on its own, doesn't need you in there every day, has a management structure, and kind of runs self-sufficiently. What's the multiple on that?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a range. There's always exceptions to the rule, but I would say you start running between 2, 3, and 4, right? It's the quality of the earnings. It's the key man risk. Like, what are you actually doing? Is it, there's a lot of little things that make a difference. Your location makes a big difference. If you're in the middle of nowhere, your buyer pool shrinks significantly. But if you're in the middle of a metropolitan area, you now have a lot of buyers to work with. So all of those things make that difference. I've got a guy making good money in a restaurant, but just he's in a small town. And it's really hard to find somebody who's willing to drive hour and a half away from the metro where all the buyers are to a small town of 5, 10, 15,000, So yeah. So I would say that 2, 3, 4 is where you're going to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And my thing is like, I've always looked at trying to value businesses at like 3 to 4 times your EBITDA. That roughly, like, that's kind of where I've always viewed it. Now I haven't in the past really thought about, the key man risk being as big of a component, but as we're talking about it, it makes a lot of sense. And here's the other thing too, we have to understand is it's also part of the overall market that we live in, right? So let's ask ourselves this, right? Same thing with the housing market. When the housing market's crazy and there's limited supply, prices go up. So let me ask everybody listening this: are restaurants really in demand right now economically? Is everyone going, man, I gotta get into the restaurant industry? It's a gold mine right now. Is that what's happening in the restaurant industry? The answer is no at this point in 2026. A lot of people are still kind of jaded from previous. And here's the other side of that too. Not only are people not really trying to get into the restaurant business right now, there's a lot of people trying to get out of the restaurant business, right? So there's a lot of supply in the market. And so what ends up happening here between all of those things is when there's a lot of supply and not a lot of demand, your prices go down. Because think of it this way: a buyer might have 10 different businesses they can purchase. What's going to make yours different? Why should they try and buy your business versus another one, right? If it doesn't make that much money, if you have to put a lot of work into it, if the equipment's all not great, if it hasn't been well maintained because you don't run a tight ship and, things are dirty and at the end of the day, is that the business they're going to want to buy? But now there are buyers for that. But let me ask you this: are those buyers the ones that are going to pay top dollar for it, or are they trying to buy it as low as possible so they can flip it and turn it around and make it something way better?
And investors are smart cats most of the time. They're not going to walk in and go, oh, you want X? Yeah, I'm going to pay top dollar. Now, there's a line that you're going to cross as a business where you go from where investors look at you and they realize what the value that you do have when you hit a certain level of operations, a certain level of profitability, like you've really dialed in your systems. A friend of mine yesterday actually sold his auto repair business in Colorado for probably a 6.5, 7 multiple, when I would have probably priced him well less than that, just looking at his numbers. But it came down to he was in the right place. He had a private equity come in who really wanted that location, that business, and that real estate all together. And they were willing to pay a premium to get him out of there so that they could take it over. That does happen. So when you get an investor, you can hit that. But at the same time, if an investor comes in and it's a turnaround project, it's gonna be rough. It's the same way, you sell a home that's been rough, you're gonna run into the same issue. The investor comes in and there's smoke damage, it's gonna be rough. It smells like cats, it's gonna be rough.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's one of the biggest kind of myths I wanted to talk through is what actually makes a difference when it comes to your price. And so we can talk about what makes a restaurant valuable from a sale perspective. And for me, there's one answer. It's net profit. That's my answer.
Yep.
The bigger the net profit, the bigger, not your sales, right? Because everyone thinks, oh, my business does so well in sales. But yeah, if you're making jack shit, you're going to be able to sell it for jack shit. You know what I mean? Like,
or less than jack shit.
so
Yeah.
I don't know. Like everyone talks about sales and top line, and they're like, oh man, my business does, 1.5 million or 2 million or whatever the case is. And they're pumping up their chest. I'm like, yeah, bro, I saw your P&Ls. Like, you were negative last year. Like, this is not a time to brag. I'm not saying that being negative is like, and I'm not trying to say that to put anyone down, but I'm just saying is like, we have to understand the like, that's the scoreboard. Net profit is the scoreboard. And I think restaurant owners, sometimes we get so used to being in the negative because there's so many situations and it's difficult and there's all this different stuff. That's the scoreboard, right? Because like, even if I went out and I grew my sales by $100,000 a year, but I spent $100,000 in marketing to make it happen, like my net profit is not growing. Like, we have to understand that, yes, growing sales is good, but only insofar as we're able to contribute that down to the bottom line. And that's not the math that most people do, because most restaurant owners, I was on another podcast interview yesterday with one of our clients, and he was an operations guy and always trusted someone else to run the numbers. He's like, I just know how to make great food. And he never knew the numbers side of it until eventually he ended up filing for bankruptcy. And, we kind of helped him through, like, navigate that not as bankruptcy attorneys, don't get me wrong, but we basically we helped him then make his business profitable once he kind of went through the bankruptcy side of things. So like, now he's in a much better place. So we helped him learn all the things that he needed to learn. But yeah, he wasn't pulling anything to the bottom line for the entirety of his existence as a business. And he ended up going bankrupt. Now he's doing great. But, it's only by learning this type of stuff. And so over time, though, his sales increased. Like, on one hand, like, yeah, I'm doing good. My sales are going up. But like, bro, you gotta make some money. Like, that's right. We forget about that point because we make ourselves feel better.
Yeah, I guess if you want, a lot of business owners have bought and sold a home. So I love going back to the analogy of buying and selling a home. Is revenue is like how many people live in a home. It's relevant, but it doesn't drive the value of the home up. It just means that's impressive that you can fit 20 people in that little house and live. That's impressive, right? But it's like, net profit is like almost how big the house is, right? The square footage, the location, right? Like, that's actually what people want, how nice the yard is, right? So that's actually what makes the difference.
Yeah, you actually add an addition onto the house. Okay, then it might be worth more. Not because you can cram an extra 2 people in there.
Exactly.
I like that analogy. That's interesting. I never heard that before.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we've talked about kind of like pricing businesses. We talked about, like, increasing value. At the end of the day, it's making it more profitable and removing yourself from the business. Because think of it this way, I would be willing to come in and buy, and I would pay top dollar. So there's in the mind of a buyer, there's kind of 2 things, right? They're either thinking, I'm looking for a project where I can buy it low, turn it around because I have the expertise, and then eventually sell it later for a profit, or keep it and have it run. So that's one kind of buyer profile that we can look at. Whereas another one is more like someone like me, right? So like, I look at different opportunities and things like that, but I'm not interested in putting any work into it at all, right? I have my thing. Like, I'm busy enough. I don't want anything to detract from my main thing. But if I could just write a check and buy a business that doesn't require anything from me, but gives me consistent returns, yeah, I'll do that. And I'll pay a premium for that, for the security of that, or the perceived likelihood of achieving that, right?
Right, so exactly.
That's what people will pay for it. So that comes from having a business that doesn't have the key man risk. And just so we clear this with everybody, or so it's fully transparent, key man risk is basically if you have yourself, or like yourself and a partner, or whatever it is, but you're the main people in the business, like, and then if you lose someone, then the business stops functioning. That's a key man risk, and it's always something that you have to evaluate. So owner operators, that's the same thing for, like, if I was going to try and sell ownership, there's massive key man risk because I'm the face, right? I'm the one here on the podcast. All of a sudden, as soon as I sell the business, there's actually no asset here because I am the asset. Right. So I know that ownership, if I was to try and sell it, would be able to sell for a very low amount of money because I haven't built it to run without me and using other people as the face. Like, I haven't diverged enough to do that. But that's just a reality of it. Right. Who's going to want to buy a business that I have to be a part of in order for it to be successful?
Yeah. Again, it's because clean financials, strong management team, documented systems and processes. Can you leave for a week and everything continue to run? Can you leave for 2 weeks, everything continue to run, right? And I would say if you're as serious about selling your business, put yourself in the shoes of the buyer and go look at other listings and put yourself and be like, would I buy this business for what the seller's looking for? It really changes your perspective to go look at listings, to go, wait, they're making $100,000 a year and they want six. And then you type that into a loan calculator through the SBA and you go, I would make $0. Why would I do that? Right? So it's, you've got to put yourself through that.
To recoup. That's a long,
plus or minus interest.
Yeah. And then the chances of things going wrong in that time, that just doesn't make sense, right? Because the other thing too, like comparing it to home sales, a home is a fairly stable asset in comparison to a business, which all of a sudden there's so many things that can go wrong. And, a home, like say someone's going to do like a rental property or something like that, is much more stable because you could sell that property afterwards, whereas with a business, over like a 6-year term or something like that, or a 10-year term, there's things that can go wrong with it, so that's risk. And we have to understand that's what the buyer is buying when they're doing that. Okay. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that owners make when they're selling?
Yeah. They've waited too long. They get desperate. Again, think of it the same reason partnerships don't work. It's death, disease, divorce, right? All these things, when you have to sell, and you have to sell right now, you're probably not going to get a good price for your business. Anybody who's got to sell today is going to have a very hard time. Not preparing your financials. The best time to start preparing is 3 to 5 years before a sale. I can help you if you're like, hey, I need to sell today. But it could be rough, right? It's like, let's buckle up and let's go, right? You're being unrealistic about your sales price, right? You run everything through the business, or you run everything yourself. Yeah. And another one is you try and sell it on your own. Because if you try and sell it on your own, it's really easy for it to get out there that you're selling your business. Now your managers know, now your team knows, the community knows, and it just provides instability. And that instability can start to affect your financials. If you're doing this and all of a sudden you start doing this, a buyers see that and they go, I ain't paying a premium anymore. I've had that happen. A business owner was doing this up and to the right, making 300, 500, 700. And then it started doing this back down to 500. We couldn't get it to sell for the life of us, because everyone's thought it was just going to keep doing this. Trajectory is big too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if it starts kind of tanking down, and I've seen that happen where this actually happened to a client of ours who decided to sell the business, and against our advice, he just told the entirety of his staff, "He's like, hey guys, just so you know, I'm going to start selling the business, and so there'll probably be a new owner." So there was no plans in place. He hadn't listed it. He hadn't done anything. He just let them know that was his intention to sell. He lost 80% of his staff within the next week and a half.
Yeah, uncertainty is brutal.
100%. They're just like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm going to go find another job. And they all did. So then he, because he was a client that had done really, really well with us and actually came on as a coach to work with us. And then he had to say, sorry, guys, I can't be a coach anymore because I have to go back and get back in my business because he unfortunately didn't follow the advice.
Yeah, and what I'd say is you're not trying to lie to your team. You're just trying to protect them, right? So it's your goal. If your goal is to find a buyer, take care of your team, take care of your managers, find a buyer that does that. And it might not be the one that pays top dollar, right? But that's a big consideration. If the guy who's going to pay top dollar is going to destroy the whole business potentially, or is a goofball and doesn't know what he's doing, do the right thing. Find a buyer that can actually take care of your team. And then after closing, tell them that you know what I mean? Tell them, hey, this is the uncertainty. We've solved it. They want to keep everybody on. Here's the new owner. His name's Bob. You know what I mean? Like you do that after the sale, not because you're going to try and lie to them, but just because a lot of team members aren't ready for that kind of news. They don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. And they also just uncertainty because you don't actually have the full picture yet.
Is it?
It's like, it's just uncertainty.
They imagine imagine the worst people. And dude, I can sell to the worst person, right? Hopefully. Hopefully.
Well, yeah, hopefully not. But you know what? And that's the thing, right? So he just kind of let the cat out of the bag too early and did that. I did like what you said about, usually looking at 3 to 5 years in advance of when you want to sell. And I can almost guarantee you that just about everybody listening to this is thinking like, well, 3 to 5 years, the reason I want to sell it is so that I can get out of it quick, which means, of course, as we've talked about, that means you're just looking at a much lower price. And yeah, that's the reality of it. So that's a point I just want to drive home, because there is this conception among restaurant owners that they can just turn around and sell it on a dime like they could a house. They're like, oh, I have this valuable asset, but they don't really know how valuable their business is, because they never really thought through that from the lens of a buyer. And they just don't know this stuff. So that all of a sudden, because I've had clients come to me and say, hey, like, I know that we've worked together for a few weeks and tried to fix this, but I don't really want to put in the work to try and fix it. So I'm just going to sell it. And we're like, it's not going to be that easy, right? And they're like, yeah, sure it will. And then, sure enough, they come back later. They're like, yeah, so it wasn't that easy. When in reality, they can be putting in the work to actually make a good exit. And here's the other thing too. Like, another thing that I talk about all the time is typically the reasons that restaurant owners want to sell their businesses are typically the reason they
Buyers don't want to buy.
Yes, thank you. Because it's really the reason you should actually fix it. Because getting it ready for sale and getting it ready to actually run for you, it's kind of the same path, right? And we got to make more money. We got to have a team in place so there's less key man risk, so it operates that way. We got to put systems, processes, and procedures in place because businesses run on their systems. And if you're the system and then you go, the business drops in value, right? Because then as soon as you walk out, stuff's not going to happen the way it should. And then therefore, why would someone buy that? They could just go start up their own place and do exactly what you're doing. Like, why would they buy it from you, right? What asset is there actually? And so that's what people don't understand, is what the real asset is that can consistently generate financial performance. So most people, I tell them, like, guys, like, I know you want to sell this thing, but all the reasons you want to sell it are the reasons you should actually fix it. And I'll tell you what, once you fix it, you might actually be able to sell it then. But honestly, most of the time, once they fix the things, like, yeah, a lot of them don't want to sell it because it's actually making more money and have provided them a better life. Same thing for you. I'm sure at one point you were like, man, I want to try and sell this. Well, actually, that's actually kind of your story, because before you met us, you went to a broker.
Yeah, and I was like, hey, I think I want to sell this. It's too much work. It's, all the things, right? It's, I get called in, I get this, I get that, right? And I want to sell it. And we put it on the market. And guess what? Nobody wanted it. And so, but during that time, our general manager started really doing a great job. And so we were like, oh, why would we sell something if I don't have to be there? We can make money from it, right? So now we saw that, right? And then I was like, oh, I could hire, ownership, and now my business is doing even better, right? And so it starts to change because, again, right to your point, the things that make you want to keep it are the same reason buyers want it. So it's kind of this, it's tough.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? And so, like, there are times when people do want to sell a business. I mean, get it up to retirement age, or like there's times when, you want to take a different career path. If we have multiple businesses, sometimes you want to focus in on one instead of others. So there's legit reasons why you want to sell a business. Here's another myth, though, is there's a myth that I felt this for so long, is that if somebody sold their business, I counted that as a failure. I was like, oh, they couldn't hack it anymore. So they sold their business and they got out. They were weak. Like, that's what I thought, when I can understand why I thought that, because the only reason for people to sell is because they couldn't do it anymore. That's what I thought.
Right.
There is a different reason for selling. It's when you can actually get a high return on your business and then actually go and, invest that money in other places. You can open up more businesses and stuff like that. Like, that's another myth that I thought selling was like losing, but that's changed for me over the last, how I view selling. I view that actually as your why, not as the trough.
Your why makes all the difference, right? So if you're selling to get out because you can't take it anymore, that's fine, right? But a buyer's going to take that and understand that, right? And there's a lot of other reasons, but yeah, no, you have to know your why, because it's hard. It's hard to sell the business. It's emotional, especially if you've been doing it your whole life and it's your identity. I mean, I just had a guy who started a business, ran it 25 years. And he goes, Joe, after closing, I think I have to leave. Like, it's going to be too hard for me emotionally. You know what I mean? Like it was really hard for him, but he knew it was the right time. He was 73. He needed to be done. Right. So it's just, you have to know your why. It's going to carry you through it's challenging to sell a business.
Yeah, it is emotionally challenging, 100%. Because I mean, a lot of us wrap so much of our identity in what we do. I mean, like my pickup truck was like wrapped as a big logo for my restaurant. Like I drove that for forever, right?
Yeah.
It was part of me. Like I mean, I still wear like this polo shirt that's logoed for ownership. I don't bother to change after work. I just still wear that. But I did that. Like I wore, my restaurant shirt for years.
Oh yeah,
for 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was a part.
People didn't recognize me if I wasn't wearing my uniform. Like I'd walk into Walmart with my normal clothes on, nobody would recognize me. But I throw my hat and my T-shirt on, boom, everybody recognizes me. So I get it. Yeah, it's tough.
So what I want to jump into here is like, what steps should someone take if they're interested in selling? Like what are the steps they should take now if they're interested? Like walk me through, like, say someone came to you and said, hey, I want to sell my business. Like what are the steps that they would take? And and then the next question we'll go into is like, what should they do now if they want to sell in the future?
Yeah. So I guess first step is call me, right? Every situation's so dynamic and so unique. Like I do free consultations. Like I'm going to sit down with you, understand your situation, understand what you're going through and why. Because then from there, we can then build a plan based on what you want to do. If you're like, hey, Joe, I want to sell this for top dollar in 5 years, 10 years. Sweet. Where are you at? Let's create a point on the graph and let's figure out where this is going, right? Or if you're like, Joe, I'm super done. I need to, you know what I mean? Then we take another tack that we try and execute. It's so unique in each person. Like even if you're like, hey, I need to sell the next 18 months, we can do things now to help as you begin to start the process, improve your business and maybe make an easier transaction during the listing process. Yeah. Each one's different. So hopefully that answered your question. Really, I do free valuations of your business. So if you're going to sit down and be like, where am I at today? I'll sit down with you, walk you through the process completely for free because you need to understand where you're at, just as important as to where you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that makes total sense. And so if someone, like, what are the biggest things someone could do if, like, say they want to sell 18, 24 months from now? Like, what are the things they should be focused on today that are going to make the biggest difference for them?
Simplifying operations and cleaning up your books. So making sure that you're running as few things through the business as possible and making sure all of it, if you can, hits the net profit. Right? You're not doing this maliciously. You're not advertising. So it hits the bottom line to try and push, right? Because that's just going to sabotage you or the new guy. You're actually taking things that, right, for tax benefits or whatever reasons, if you've got personal cell phones or you're paying for your laptop or different things, like just stop running it through the business, take it home personally, pay for it. It hits the bottom line. Those things make a big difference.
Yep. No, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, the way that I look at it too is, obviously getting your books in order, but how can you make as much money as possible in the next, like, that's what they're looking at. How can you make as much money as possible and remove yourself from it?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of
those are the two biggest things. Yeah. And if I gave you any more than that, it would, you know what I mean? Like you get, we as business owners are weird cats. We need focus, focus on those two things, and that will begin to make all the difference. It kind of solves the other issues if you do that.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes sense. So if somebody's out there and they're like, hey, I have questions. I want to know what this is like. I want to get my business right. How do they find you? How can they reach out?
So LinkedIn, Joseph McKeown. I'm with First Choice Business Brokers. We're a nationwide brokerage. I primarily work in Minnesota. If you are nearby, or I'm talking to a guy who's in the eastern states, right, and he's looking at his business and doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to do this. What should I charge? How long should it be? You know what I mean? All these different questions. More than happy to answer those, and I can help you find somebody too. So if you're like, hey, Joe, I like the way you handle this. Can you help me find someone who will handle like you do? It might not be a first choice person. It might be somebody else. Like, I look at this as how can I best help and serve you? And so by coming and understanding what you need, I can help you then find it. And sometimes you need to talk to ownership and be in ownership longer. Sometimes you need to go over here and do this and go over here and do that and not work with me. So, but those would be the things.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate your time. And if you guys have questions, if you're on YouTube, hit up the comments. If not, shoot Joseph a DM on Instagram.
LinkedIn, and I'll help you.
Yeah, or LinkedIn. Yeah, awesome. Well, man, it's been a pleasure. It's been great chatting, and obviously, I'd love to see your success with ownership and getting you to the point where you're at now, but also then being able to help other people. I'm glad you reached out and we chatted a little bit, because at the end of the day, like, we want to help support restaurant owners in all stages of their journey, whether they're trying to make things better or whether it's that time to move on. So absolutely, man, it's been great.
I appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you.
All right, we'll chat later.
Bye.